Hi, this is Sean. I'm back with another episode of All Things Black. I have a new friend here.
Hey. Um, I'm
Jenny.
Shan- I'm Shantell Stubbs. I am a recent criminal justice master's graduate from the University of Louisville in Louisville, Kentucky. My studies included researching on the juvenile justice system, disproportionality in sentencing, and reform work. I'm currently the community outreach coordinator at the Speed Art Museum here in Louisville, Kentucky, and my work is centered around diversifying spaces that are usually predominantly white and breaking down barriers of access for people of color.
Okay. All right. Thank you. We're glad to have you here today, and we're excited about hearing your perspective. Um, so thank you. Um, today, me and Chantel are going to be talking about colorism. So our first question is, what does the word colorism mean to you?
Well, to me, the word colorism is a caveat from the social construct of race. So, to me, it is something that's not real, but it's widely accepted as a real ideal. And it is the basis of discriminating against people based on their skin complexion or pigmentation, whichever one you prefer to use. Um, and that's what I would define colorism is as a form of discrimination based on skin tone.
Okay. So what do you think are some examples of colorism?
Well, some examples of colorism that I know personally through my research is within the African American diaspora is light skin versus dark skin.
Yeah.
In the criminal justice system, there are proven facts that people with darker
Yeah.
skin are given harsher sentences than those who are lighter skin. And we even see things in different cultures outside of African American and Asian cultures. We
Mhm.
see skin bleaching is one of the number one fields, and we also see that like anytime we see like any Asian type of movie or film, they wear that very white or pale makeup. And so those are examples to me that are very prevalent, not only like in everyday real life, but like even in the media. Um, Brown paper bag tests and different things like that are examples of colorism.
Why do you believe some people have negative attitudes about dark skin?
Ooh, that's a tough one.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I would just go back to what I think about race and how it's a social construct and what social constructs are. I mean, it's an idea that's widely accepted. And so, honestly, when you grow up and you hear something so many times, if you grew up and you learned that the sky was purple, nobody, can really tell you that the sky is not purple. And so, I just think that it's something that is taught and it is a byproduct of racism, and it's just a way to continue to divide people within different communities because there's always a person who wants to be superior in my mind. Even if we just look at the food chain, there's always one person in the food chain who kind of dominates everybody else.
Right.
And I feel like that's because of race being created. That's kind of a thing that is more prevalent when we talk about colorism.
Right.
And so when I think about why people have negative attitudes towards it or about it, is because many people don't like to be divided, or people who benefit from the division of it don't
Mhm.
want people to understand that we are all a human race and
Yeah.
we're not a race of crayons that are
Right.
based on colors.
Right. Okay. So, what role do you believe traditional media has in perpetuating colorist stereotypes?
The role I feel is the lack of diversity and inclusion. Um, there's never a space for more than one uh, darker skinned character,
Yep.
or the darker skinned character necessarily always plays a specific role,
Yep.
whether it be the funny friend but not ever the romantic interest,
Mhm.
whether it be the friend that is mean, whether it be the person that is goofy or whatever the case may be. I feel like that's how media perpetuates it because in our minds, these are things that influence us. We talk about influence in family communities. You have to think about it's not just the parents raising their children, it's everything that influences its community. And TV, especially in our day and age, TV, media, they are a big part of what raises children in this culture. So when we see that the girl who has always gotten or the boy who is most popular is lighter or fairer skin or he's from a certain place, or when you see things that talk about African people, like growing up for me, it was just like people would say African booty scratcher or anything, all these derogatory things. So when we see these things on TV, it just continues to reinstill this false narrative that you have to be one thing, you have to look like one thing in order to be accepted. And if you don't, then either you can be an exception or you're just like
Right.
out of luck. So that's how I think the media perpetuates the idea of colorism because they do not take time to really be diverse and inclusive in casting and writing, and even the certain type of roles that they write for people.
Right. Okay. So, what role do you believe colorism plays in dating and marriage?
Um, mm, well, the first thought that came to my mind is in it all to me just goes back to race, and just this accepted idea of one versus the other.
Mhm.
And I've talked about this maybe a couple times this week really already when I'm talking about race, and like people are like, well, everybody's not, it's not just white and black, and obviously we know that, but when we talk about race, it's like white and other, so everything
Yeah.
else is black in my opinion.
Yeah.
Um and so I know that in the African American community or the black community, whatever people want to call it, I will just call it black. Um, but in our community, biracial marriages or relationships are sometimes frowned upon. And I think that just comes from the trauma, um, the danger, um, and even sometimes yeah, go back to danger because when a black woman, birth a light skinned child, then somebody knew that something was going on. And not only was she in danger, but the child was in danger. When we
Right.
go back to, slave times or even Jim Crow era, there was danger for those type of people or even for those that you love. But then also, like, um, just like it encompasses a lot of different things, like even darker skinned people, you are just seen as violent and you're seen as aggressive and you're not ever seen as vulnerable
Yeah.
because your skin is dark or because your face rests one way. And
Exactly.
so when we talk about these negative attitudes and how they are received, I think on one hand it can come from trauma. Some parents or families have dealt with the trauma where they have a negative attitude and they teach their children to have negative attitudes, like don't bring a white man or Asian, like you can only bring this type of person into my house, or oh, only real sisters look like this, or
Mhm.
whatever. And I speak mainly from African American standpoint because that's what I relate to the most.
Right.
um, and so that's my experience of it. But there's another side of the spectrum that has probably benefited from the treatment that lighter skinned people get. And
Mhm.
so when they think about, I've even seen on social media when people birth children and the father is darker and the mother is scared that her child is going to be dark. And it's just like, um, it's really sad. And I think what will help change that is a breaking down of of this racial system, but will that happen and how will it happen? Really don't know.
Okay. So, what do you believe is the difference between colorism and preference? Is there a difference?
Yeah, I believe that there's a difference. I believe it all has to do with everybody's heart posture. So you can prefer to be with one person over the other, but I think as long as there's mutual respect of people and no type of degradation towards others, then I think that you can have a preference. Like you can like all people, but there are some preferences. For example, in high school, I went to a predominantly white high school. It was a magnet school and all this stuff. I like the white guy. Okay, I'm married to a black man now. I've always envisioned myself being married to a black man because those were the examples that I had, like with my grandparents.
Right,
But where the preference came in, the white guy wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't mean or any of those things. He was really cool. But where my preference came in was that I wanted somebody that could relate to me,
right,
and the things that I talk about. And I am very black heavy. I talk
mhm,
about blackness all the
right,
time, every day. And I don't know if just because I'm a person who wants to respect people, I don't think that that would be a relationship that he necessarily want to be in. All I'm talking about is black and the white man and this and the system and this. And so for me, that was a preference. Not that I don't like white guys or that I could never have saw myself with one, but I think my preference came in because of other things outside of his skin or outside of
right,
his heritage. And so I think that's what makes the difference when you start to make decisions based on the inner character instead of the outward appearance. But
right.
if you make assumptions based on the outward appearance and call it preference, then I
Yeah,
think you're just trying to fool yourself because you know good because you're making an assumption. People can say, "Well, I only date light skinned girls because dark skinned girls are mean and they do this," but you've
exactly.
made an assumption because you have not met all dark skinned girls in the world.
Right, right,
You have
exactly.
not. You have not. Learned a person enough to say, you know what, she actually relates to me or he actually relates to me. And so I think that makes the difference, the judging on the internal versus the external. And that will show you who is truly being a colorist or somebody who is really just, they just have a preference based on who they are and who the person is.
Okay. So our question is, how do you believe gender intersects with color?
Okay, sorry,
Okay,
my
you.
mama was calling.
No, you're
But
okay.
how does gender intersect with colorism? Ooh, that goes back to criminal justice because I just was thinking about some of the studies I did. Like, even when we talk about one, gender is always at the intersection of anything, I
Yeah.
believe. Because when we talk about juvenile justice and we talk about all the programs that we have for young black men, we
Mm,
don't see the reciprocal for young black girls. And
okay.
then, even going further, when we talk about just outside of the resources, but when we talk about how we're treating them
Mm,
in these spaces, we see that there's more research, understanding, and some level of compassion for young black men. When we talk about young black girls, there's an adultification of their bodies
oh,
because
right.
they're most of the time more responsible in their households, and that nurturing thing that comes out in every female. I mean, even when we see little kids, like if there's a girl, she has a baby doll and she treats the baby like a real baby.
Yeah.
And so gender intersects everything. And so when I think about how it intersects with colorism, I think about the privilege there
Mm,
with that, and how I feel like there's a privilege to colorism when we talk about males
yeah.
because it's not all the time, especially where we are right now in today's time. It's not really a bad thing about like dark guys or dark men, but
Nope.
are light men. It's just like, oh, if he's dark, he's a tall, dark glass or something. And if he's like, it's like, oh, girl, y'all gonna have pretty kids with pretty hair
Yeah, that's true.
and this. So there's privilege there. But when you talk on the women's side, colorism becomes a negative thing. And I'm not saying it doesn't affect men, but I'm saying it doesn't affect them as much
It
in my
doesn't.
community.
No, it
And
doesn't.
so when you talk about women, and even though there's this move about hashtag, melanin popping, we still don't really in this community appreciate darker women. It's an
No.
exception. Like I feel like I've just recently start seeing people say that Kelly Rowland is beautiful.
Yeah, that's new.
Like nobody has ever thought that she was beautiful. She was just like the other girl. And if you couldn't be Beyonce in the group when you was like with your cousins,
You
it
were
was
the
like, well, I'm
killer.
gonna be Kelly then. It's
Mm-hmm.
like the darker girl is always the second option.
Exactly.
The darker girl is always the one you just settle for.
Yep.
And that goes back to your previous question, which was a great question about how is it preference or is it colorism?
Yeah.
Because a lot of the times, even for our male counterparts who know that colorism is real, they will say it's a preference, but they're really being colorist.
Exactly.
And because they have never gotten to know a certain person, but they judge them on their outward appearance. And so I think that intersection is big because it doesn't affect males as much. They don't notice it as much. They don't
Yeah.
perceive it as much. They don't
Right.
really care about it, quite honestly, unless they have daughters, unless they see somebody suffering from it that's close to them. It doesn't really matter to them. And the same can go for like sexual assault. Not to say it doesn't happen to
Right.
men, but it doesn't happen as much.
Yeah, it's not as
So
prevalent.
when you see women talking about it or starting this type of dialogue and saying how does colorism affect us, they really don't relate to it or take it as serious because it's not really that negative of effect to them. And so that intersection is a big one. I don't know if I've ever seen any research on it or
Yeah.
even seen any men open up a conversation about this.
Yeah. So I've so far I've talked to about 40, 40, maybe 40 or 45 people about this, like
Mm-hmm.
recorded. So of those, I've talked to maybe 4 or 5 men, and it's not the same level. Yeah, it's not the same level. Even some research I've read talks about how it's really not the same level. It's really not the same level for men and women. That we don't experience colorism the same way. That could partially be because a lot of it is that women the beauty standard.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely don't think we experience it the same way. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, even outside, like in our community, I feel that way. But like when we talk about colorism outside of the community, like obviously we know, like that if you are a darker skinned person and if you are a male and you interact with um police.
Yeah, it's work. Yeah, I mean, it's crazy because you think like dark skinned males are like women from like my research, women like them. I've heard the women say, "Oh, he's strong. If I get in a fight, he'll shoot." Da da da. That's what the women say, and they say this as positive things. But then you have colorism and with police violence and police interaction, those same qualities that women assign to dark skinned black men as positive things are actually negative in their interaction with police because police see dark skinned black men as more threatening. So, they're more likely to act a certain way towards them. So, they might have it good in like dating, but like if you look outside of like dating,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Yeah. And I was just recently at a training where we were talking about gender transformative training, and we were talking about how do we get young black men or adult men to actually accept the services that are offered to them. And we talked like we drew this box about okay, what does a, a man look like to you? And some of those things were like he has to be a leader, he needs to be strong, he should be this, and he should be that. And so there were all these things. And so then we were asked, okay, so what do you call somebody who's like not a manly man? And people were like a sissy or a B, or, all these things are like, he's weak, he's vulnerable, this, and that. And so we talked about how hard it is. Like, some of these things are like good things. Like, to be a leader, like, you should be vulnerable. But on one hand, like, you can't be vulnerable to your women because then we think you're weak. Or then, like, if you show up strong in like a police situation, then it's just like, well, you dead or you're in jail. And so it's just like sometimes I feel like it's just so hard, especially for men at large. And I'm not even just saying black men,
It's
but
true.
like it's so hard for, okay, where do we go? Am I supposed to be strong and not take nothing from anybody, or how do I be vulnerable? So those are, and like that question you asked about intersection, it's just so much that intersects in every field.
Yeah.
And I don't think people even stop to think about how does race and how does colorism even intersect in the healthcare field? How does it intersect when we talk about employment, or we talk about, longevity of prison sentences and things like that? It's everywhere.
Yeah. Okay. So a few more questions. So you okay? Do you believe that colorism is institutionalized? I feel like we already touched this. Like, does it affect job status, socioeconomic, prison sentences? Yeah, we kind of touched on these, but yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I definitely think it's institutional. It's ingrained. I mean, when we think about, the government started with the Constitution and all of this, it was made up by one certain group of people that looked a certain way, that came from a certain class of people, that owned a certain group of people that looked a certain way, that were taken from a certain place. So colonialization has a lot to do with that. Slave trade has a lot to do with that. And so it's just institutional. Um, and it's just like, how do you break something that this government was built on and it's continuing to go on that route? And then we have leadership in the highest office to this country that continues to perpetuate those ideals of toxic masculinity,
Hmm.
um, of segregation, of intolerance, hatred towards the other.
Yeah.
And so I know people who are black will say, and who try to be open minded will say that, well, race is not just white and black. And, that there's been this thing like where people are like, well, if you are like Mexican, you're black. And they're like, well, no, we're not. And it's because people struggle with accepting race, which is like something that's made up, and people are trying to relate to their ethnicities. And so it's so ingrained in us that we can't even differentiate between the two. Like, well, if we talk about race, well, yeah, you're black because it's always just been white and other. But if we leave race out of it, then I'm not black. And
Yeah.
most of us wouldn't even, and I think that's the hard part. Most of us would not know who we are because most of us don't know our ethnic makeup. Now, I know that my dad had Jamaican in him, so I can just say, okay, well, I'm Jamaican. I'm
Yeah.
not black. And then somebody can say, well, I'm Filipino, like I'm not black, or whatever the case, or they can say I'm Irish, or I'm German, I'm not white. But when we look, like you said, like we look at this institution, it is institutionalized because we can't even, it's so instilled in us, for, I mean, even for many kids, that Columbus discovered this country.
Hmm.
It's a part of, it's a part of this makeup, it's a part of our culture, and that's what we've been taught. And so when you learn something new, it's hard to break away from that.
Yeah. And so we just got a couple more questions. Um, do you um, do you have any personal experiences with colorism?
Yes, I do. Girl, let me move my fro back for this. I definitely have personal experiences with colorism. I
Mhm.
mean, from family to
Yeah.
classrooms, and some of the stuff I really don't think people even knew was a problem, especially when you talk about families and being young. aunties, uncles, girl, you getting dark. It's sometime you getting dark. I mean, I thought because the sun was on us, everybody got darker, so I didn't know that there was like a problem. I thought it was like kind of like this magical thing, like wow, like our skin changes and it protects us, during the winter and during this season. And so I've definitely experienced it. I mean, even growing up in middle school and high school, my god sister was light skinned, and like we could have hang out on the block, because back then it was just like everybody on the block hangs out. It's like everybody would like my sister first, but then when like we were just talking about, when they find out the content, and she's not a bad person, but when they find out that her inner self does not really match up with them, and then they've gotten to know me, they're like, oh, well, I want to talk to you now. But it's just like your second thought, you're after,
Hmm.
because you looked at her color first and felt like, well, this is better. I mean, even my first boyfriend, it was like he liked darker girls, but that wasn't accepted. It was no melanin movement or nothing. And so it was like this uphill battle. Oh, she's so dark, bro. Why you with her? She's so dark, this, and that. And now we're in a different space, and it's like, oh wow, she's beautiful. Like all his homeboys that would joke on me, it's like now it's something new. And I mean, even in my jobs, because and not even just colorism, but I think even it goes to like my hair,
Yeah.
and because I'm darker, so it just makes it different. Like if I was lighter and I had a different grade of hair, me wearing my hair natural wouldn't be a problem.
Right.
um, but just even in jobs, like if I was to wear a wig or get sew in, oh my gosh, your hair looks so good today, like wow. But then other days people would literally not talk to me. I would say good morning and people would walk past me. And so, I mean, I've experienced it on all fronts, in family, outside of family. I mean, I felt negative feelings about it. I felt sad. I felt like I literally used to pray and want to be lighter. Like
Yeah.
I used to not want to be out in the sun. I remember one time, like I nared my arm because I was like, well, if I move the hair, like my arm will lighten up. And so it's crazy the measures that you know will take. And just like I was saying, like because the media, like even if your
Yeah.
mom, like my mom always told me I was beautiful, but like that's sometimes not enough.
It's not.
And so, because if you see it everywhere and your friends, and it just makes me sad a little bit, girl. I won't cry because, like, there's kids out here who feel like they're not beautiful.
Yeah.
I mean, even like I had in elementary school, one of my Asian friends, like, they like her family would call her dark. And I'm like, girl, what? And they would treat her so different. They'd be like, oh my gosh, you're so black, you're so black. And people just use the word black as if it's just this so negative thing, and it's really sad. And I've experienced it, but I've grown from it. I've like finally like accepted who I am, and understanding that we as humans were made different. If we were all the same, there would be no need for interaction. I
Yeah.
mean, Earth wouldn't be fun. We wouldn't learn new things because everybody was the same. And so I'm just happy that I'm in a space where I can feel confident about who I am, be free to be authentic about who I am, and help other people see, and hopefully try to get the criminal justice system to see that there aren't these biases aren't implicit anymore. They're explicit. And we
Yeah.
have to stop, and honestly we need to stop hiding behind implicit and explicit bias. Like it's
Yeah.
racism, it's
Yeah. I
colorism,
agree.
and it is what it is. And until we call it what it is, it's not going to change.
Okay. Um. Thank you. So our last two questions are, um, do you think colorism will ever end, and who is responsible for breaking the cycle?
um I don't want to sound morbid, but I don't think it's going to end.
Yeah.
um and everybody is responsible for making it stop. Um, the government is responsible for changing laws, for looking at old, outdated systems and ways of regulating things. they're responsible on that front. Our local government is responsible on making sure that there is representation in the House. Um, Parents are responsible in teaching their children the difference, teaching them about race, but teaching them how it's not real, and teaching them, trying to find where they're from, dealing with those things. I mean, we're responsible for dealing with our inner traumas and our inner insecurities so we don't pass those down to the next generation. So I think it's a group effort. I mean, everybody has to do something to change it. And everybody's not going to get on board. But I think making as many people aware as possible is the best thing to do, because we can't save the whole world, but at
Right.
least we can save a good amount of people to let them know that it's okay to be different. Um, and nobody is wrong for being who they are. Nobody is not right or ugly or violent or incapable of being vulnerable or incapable of being seen or only being able to be a basketball player or this or that. Like, there's a wide range of um, there's a wide range of things that everybody can do to end colorism.
Right.
And everybody just has to find their space, whatever that is. And I mean, I know that I'm starting even by trying to get my African ancestry done on myself so that I can know exactly, like, okay, this is where, like, this is the part of Africa you're from, and this is the tribe
Right.
you're from, so that I can teach my children a little bit more about themselves and I can learn myself. So I'm
Yeah.
not just teaching them history from the post-Atlantic slave trade, because
Right.
there's history
History
before that.
before. Exactly.
So everybody literally is responsible. I mean, even down to voting. I think that's a big part, because if we don't have people who have these progressive mindsets, then we're going to stay in the same place with the same old white men
Right.
running government and don't see a problem with anything. So that's my thoughts.
Okay. Thank you so much, Shantell. We
Well, thank
appreciate
you.
your perspective.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited about it.
Thank you so much. And I enjoy talking with you. And so this is Sean and Chantel, and we're another episode of All Things Black. Thank you for watching.